Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be showing you how to self-produce a podcast in Premiere Pro. Let's get into it. Yes! So you've clicked on this video because you're interested in video podcasts. So maybe you are looking to start a podcast of your own, or you already do a podcast, you just don't have the video capabilities, or you just want to upgrade your video a little bit to where you have multiple camera angles and all those post-production features that you see in some of the big podcasts produced on YouTube and all around the internet. So me and my brother have been producing City of Palms podcast for some years now, and we don't have the biggest show, but I do feel like we have a pretty good handle on how we produce it, and we do it just him and I. We haven't yet outsourced to anybody else, and I wanted to share with you a few of the things that we do to produce our show. And I use Premiere Pro as our main editing tool to produce our videos for YouTube. And that's not to say this is the very best thing to use or the only thing to use. There's plenty of editing softwares out there. A lot of them are free. I used to use a free one for the first year or so of us doing our podcast. I've just found that Premiere Pro is the one I prefer the most, and the one that these techniques are going to apply to. Even though you may be able to do some of these things in other editing softwares, Premiere Pro is just kind of what I've used for a long time, and how I've kind of got a grip on producing a show of my own. So the first thing that I want to get into is, before you even step into the editing room, I want to go over how to organize your files so that you can streamline the editing process. And this is assuming you already have a way to record the audio for your podcast, a way to record video for your podcasts, and I'm not going to say what the best ways to do that are. We use a Rodecaster Pro to record our audio, and we use a Canon T3i and an iPhone and a GoPro for our 3 camera angles. There's plenty of ways you can record audio. You can do it just straight off of your phone. There's plenty of ways you can record video, including a cell phone, which is one way that we do it. The first thing that I do is I have a template folder that I keep in my hard drive for each and every episode. So before I start every edit, I have this audio folder, and I have the 3 camera folders, and I have a couple that are going to be used for my post-production exporting as I'm exporting video clips for social media, and maybe audio clips for social media or for a soundboard, and all of my post-production elements that I've already created, like the intro reels, the outro reels, logos, things like that. I have these all ready to go in a template folder, and then as we get done recording a new episode, I just copy this, make a new one, and name it whatever episode we're on. Today I'm going to be showing you episode 126 is the one I'm editing today. So if you look right into these folders, you can see my Rodecaster Pro saves one big audio file for all the different microphones and things like that, and you'll see what that looks like as I put it in Premiere Pro. But I have my audio files in here. I have my Canon T3i footage in here. And then I call it Canon 2, but I use an iPhone as our main angle, because I have an iPhone 14, and it does a better job than the DSLR in a lot of cases. It does take a little bit of tweaking in Premiere Pro with some post-production, messing with the brightness and things like that, but I'll show you all that as we get along with it. So once you have all your SD cards dumped into these folders, and or if you use a Google Drive or what have you, just getting all the files organized this way into a hard drive is the best way to start out. And then we're going to open up Premiere Pro and begin our edit. So I'm going to open up Premiere Pro, and again, this isn't the only way you can do this. I'm sure a lot of these techniques I'm going to show you can be used in lots of basic editing softwares. Premiere Pro is just the one that I like the best, and I'm able to afford it's not that expensive per month, but I'm able to afford it, and as well as the rest of the Adobe suite. And as a creative, I've found it to be one of the best investments I could have made. So all I'm going to do is click on New Project, and I'm not an expert at Premiere Pro by any means. I'm going to name this episode 126, And I actually first started using Premiere Pro as I started a podcast. So I kind of learned as I went. And so I don't know all the features Premiere Pro has. If you're well versed in this software, you might have ways you can improve upon these techniques and better self-produce a podcast. But I'm just going to show you the things I've figured out in order to produce me and my brother's show. So this is the default layout of Premiere Pro, and this is actually pretty much exactly how this is the exact interface that I use for our edits, and sometimes I'll adjust these windows to make them bigger or smaller depending on what I'm working on. But the very first thing I'm going to do is open up that folder, episode 126, and I'm going to drag this right into Premiere. And the cool thing about this software is if I grab this folder and take it into Premiere Pro and dump it in these where we organize our bins, it's going to import. And it's going to import it. It says this because I have GoPro files in there that aren't video files, but that's okay. That's not going to affect our editing. So it dumps it in here exactly as you have it in your computer. So now I'm going to have my episode 126 overall folder and then all the little folders within it. And it makes it really user-friendly, and it makes it easy for me. I'm a very visual person, so it gives me a visual of all of the content I have over here, the raw files, and then to the right over here is where we're going to be manipulating it all and creating this 1 to 2 hour long project to upload to YouTube. So now the first step for me is I always like getting my audio sorted out first. So again, depending on what software you use or what your recording process is, this is going to vary. With my Rodecaster Pro, it'll actually save all of our microphones as separate audio files. So if I take this is the 3 parts. I think this was about an 1.5 hour long podcast, and the Rodecaster, it breaks up the audio into digestible segments on its own. So you can see this one is a 31-minute recording. The next one is another 31-minute and 17-second recording, and then the last one is the final 20-minute segment of the show. So I'm going to start with the first part, and I'm going to click this and drag it down to this little piece of paper, and this is going to create a new sequence. This is a very important feature that you're going to use a lot throughout your process. So you're going to drag it to this piece of paper, and it creates a sequence of the same name of the file you just dropped. So I automatically, before I forget, rename this, and I call it episode 126 audio raw. So I know that this is the raw file of the microphone, because as you'll see, it shows you the audio waves, and sometimes Danny's microphone is quieter than mine, or his voice is quieter than mine, and I have to adjust these levels so that we each sound appropriate for the listener and all of that. So what I'm first going to do, I've dropped the first bit of the sequence in there, but we still have over an hour of content to put in, so I'm going to take the second one, click and drag, and instead of creating a new sequence, I'm going to go into this existing sequence and drag it right here next to it, and close the gap right here by right-clicking, ripple delete, and that closes the gap. Sometimes I don't like trying to manually drop it exactly in line, because if I even just shift a minute or two, then it's going to cut off some of the audio, and it's going to affect the whole rest of the edit. So I like to play it safe, and I'll show you again with this third segment. You click and drag right here, drop it, and then ripple delete so it lines up perfectly. And then if you zoom out of the sequence, you can see what the overall episode looks like. This is an 1 and 23 minutes of content. And what I like to do is next I'll double click right here on the name of the sequence. I double click it, and it full screens it. And this makes it easier for me to see all of the different audio inputs the Rodecaster has saved. And most of them you'll see, we have like sound effects and a soundboard and all sorts of different microphone and instrument inputs to our Rodecaster, most of which we don't use, so they're just gonna be blank. So what I'm gonna do is lock all of those so that we don't even have to mess with them. And when I lock them, they're not gonna be editable, so I'm not gonna accidentally click and mess with anything I shouldn't. And then what I first want to do, I can see my audio levels sound loud and good, so I'm going to go ahead and lock mine. And then these that are all smaller, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can get a better idea of how low they are. and then if I right click, it'll give me audio gain option, and this is how I can adjust the gain of the sequence. So if I click 6, let's see what that does to the sequence. Some of this for me is just trial and error, so that didn't quite get it at the same level as my audio, so let's try it. Let's add a couple more and see how that sounds. Okay, so it actually seems like I need to lower my audio a little bit. Let's minus this one by 3. So now if I double click it again and minimize it, you can actually see this bar on the right is the audio level. And what I've found is -12 is about where you want it to be for it to be the perfect volume for the listener. So if it dips a little bit, that's okay. If it goes over a little bit, that's okay. But you don't want it to go way up here and start peaking, and you don't want it to be way down here where the listener has to crank their volume of their phone or their car all the way up so that they can hear your voice. All right, let's reduce that gain a little bit more because it's a little too loud still. Okay, so now it's looking like these are about even. And so what I'm going to do, because these are all separate, the Rodecaster separated all these sequences, I have to do the exact same thing. So let's double check what the audio is here. We've got it at -8, so now if I click this one, it'll be at 0 again, so we need to put that one also at -8. And then let's go ahead and go to the third audio and switch that one to -8 as well, so they're all the same level. And then let's lock those back and go back to the quieter mics and right click, check what the gain is. We've got those at +8. So now let's click over, switch these to +8 so that they're equal. Switch these to +8 so that they're equal. There. Now all the audio for the whole hour and 20 minutes should be at the right level. Now the reason I have this as a separate sequence is because throughout my edit, let's minimize this, throughout my edit, if I'm noticing while I'm doing camera cuts and going through the video portion of the episode, if I notice one moment of time where the audio is way too loud or way too quiet, I can actually go back into my raw audio and zoom in to whichever part of the sequence I need to adjust. I can adjust the audio gain so that it sounds correct, and then whatever edits I make to this raw audio sequence, it's going to affect the next sequence we're going to create. So, and I can show you that in action as we go through the episode. So what I'm going to do next, now that this audio sounds good to me, I'm going to take this sequence that we just made, and the cool thing about Premiere Pro is if you take this sequence, click it, and drag it back down to this piece of paper, it's going to make a whole new sequence out of what we just made. So this made a new sequence of the same name, so I don't get confused. Let's rename it. And I always like to do episode 126, draft 1, so that I know this is my first draft of the episode, of the full episode. And notice that there's no more cuts in here. It's created a full hour and 20-minute episode with the audio at the levels we adjusted. So if I look at it, everything should be near -12 now. Okay, so now we've got our draft 1 started, and just to show you as an example, if I'm looking at the beginning of this episode and the audio levels, if I go back into the raw audio and I go back to one of these and I drastically increase or decrease the audio, let's go to -30. Just let's make it real quiet. So then if I go back to our draft 1, because this was created out of that raw audio sequence, the changes are going to go into effect immediately. And this is going to be way too quiet. So let's go back to our raw audio. Let's go ahead and Control Z the adjust we just made. Control Z is going to undo. Go back to our draft 1, and we're ready to go. So now the next important step, and something that I do and Danny and I do in our recording, is at the very start of our production process, as we get all the cameras rolling and audio rolling, I do a big clap at the beginning of our session so that I have a audio peak. And I'll show you exactly why I do that. If I zoom in, I'm gonna first look for that audio peak, and then that's gonna help me line up the audio to the audio from all of the video files. So let's see what that looks like. So I found my audio peak right here where I clap. You see where it goes all the way up to red? That's where I slapped my fingers together. And what I do is I'm gonna put a big red marker right here. So this little button here in the sequence window places a marker. This is gonna be very important for this editing technique. So we're gonna use this throughout the whole edit. So it places a green marker by default. I like to put red when I know that this is a very important part of the episode I need to pay attention to, whether it's I need to put a post-production element, or I need to cut this section, or this is the very start of the recording and where I need to line up all my audio. So I'm gonna put a marker there. I can zoom out a little bit so you can see where it is in relation to the rest of the episode, right at the beginning. And now, this part is the most intricate and tedious, but once this part's done, the fun really starts. So next I'm gonna go back into these folders. I'm gonna open up my GoPro camera folder, and I'm gonna go to the first audio recording, and if you double click it, it shows up in this preview window. And it looks like it's me testing the camera. But at some point, we're all sitting down. More camera testing. Okay, so now I found the audio file or the video file where I first started recording. And this, you'll see where I clap. And this GoPro has its own audio. So the audio from this GoPro file is going to be from that recording device, not from the mics. And obviously in our episode, we want the high quality microphone audio to be broadcast and not the audio from the cameras. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the audio of my clap right there at that peak. I'm gonna put this in and out marker. We're also gonna be using these in and outs very often in this technique. So I click this in, so that way this audio file or video file is gonna start right here, and then I can take this whole thing. I'm gonna lock the sequence so that I don't accidentally drag it over something else, and then click the picture right here, click and hold, drag it down to the sequence, and where that in started, it's gonna begin. So I'm gonna drop that right at my red marker. And you can do this visually. If you zoom in, you can actually compare where the peaks are, and you can try to line up that peak. I try to do it audibly. That's why this is a tedious process, because so I have to make sure that there's no echo. So if one is even just slightly, just 1 or 2 frames off, there's going to be a slight echo with the 2 audios. But it looks like I got it first try to where these are lined up, but I don't want this GoPro audio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock the video track in this sequence so that this is the only highlighted audio track, and I'm going to delete it just to get it out of my way. And now the lips should be lined up to where anything that we're saying on the GoPro footage is going to line up with the audio from our microphones. And now we have to do the same process for each camera angle, and then we should be ready to start our cuts. So now I'm going to close up the GoPro folder because we're done in there for now. Let's open up my phone folder and find the first recording and see if I can find where that clap is. Now we're going to go to that next camera angle from the different device and try to find that same clap moment. Right there. Do the same thing. We're going to click that in to start the video clip right there. Click and hold the video, drag it into this sequence, and put it right at that same marker of audio peak, and see if that lines up. And it doesn't look like there's any echo there either, so we matched it up right. Let's zoom back in, lock that video so we don't accidentally delete it, and then delete that video by pressing delete. And now you'll notice we're out of video tracks. because Premiere Pro by default only gives you 3. And so what I'm going to do is right click, click add track, and that's going to automatically put another video track in there. And with Premiere Pro, they also have these blue indicators. This is what is editable and what isn't. So if you have one that isn't highlighted blue, if you do any sort of cutting or something, it's going to affect everything that's in blue but not what isn't in blue. So I'm going to go ahead and click it to make them all highlighted blue, and then we can start working on that third camera angle to line up the audio. But you'll also notice recording devices, the video display is going to be a little different. So you can see this looks funky here in the display window because they're different sizes and orientations. So all you have to do, let's unlock that video track, highlight it, and then if we go up here into the editing window, we can click on the Effect Controls tab, and this is how you're going to manipulate the position of the clip, the scale of the clip, and you can do all sorts of stuff in here, like change the opacity to less opaque or more opaque, more transparent, less transparent. But what we're going to do right now is go to the scale menu and click and hold, and it's just like a dragging feature. You can click and drag and make it slightly bigger, and I'm just going to make it so that it looks like Danny and I are right in the center of the frame. Let's check and see how we look when we're just chilling. Zoom out a little bit. And now let's just adjust accordingly. We could maybe drop the positioning down or over a little bit to center us. Center the positioning down a little bit. So now that looks like we're right about in the center. You'll also notice it's a little dark. So I'm going to make the clip a little bit brighter, and how I'm going to do that is go down here into our project window and click on the Effects tab. And if I click Effect, it's going to give you every single effect Premiere Pro has to offer. But the cool thing is you can hit this little search bar, and I'm going to type brightness. There we go. We can see under the video effects and color correction folders, we have a brightness and contrast effect. So I'm going to click and hold this, and if I drop it right into this track, it's going to automatically apply that effect. Now there's no features on that effect yet, but if we're back in this Effect Controls window, not only can we now adjust the positioning and the scale of the clip, but if we scroll down, we can see that effect we dropped in, and we can now manipulate the brightness and the contrast. So I just do this by eye. I don't have an exact method. I just kind of look at it and adjust it as I need to see how the clip is looking and what I think is going to be best for the viewing. And that looks okay. So I'm going to hold that there, and all of this can be changed throughout the edit too. Like if I notice that maybe it doesn't match up with the other camera angles or something like that, you can easily just go back into the editing window. And I will say, when you click different tracks, if I have both these videos open and unlocked, whichever one I'm clicked on and highlighted on, that's what this Effect Controls window is going to manipulate. So, and you'll also notice that I have both right on top of each other, so I can't see this GoPro footage anymore. So what I'll show you is if you click this eyeball, it'll hide that clip. So this whole track right here is now hidden from view. So all we can see is what's underneath it, the GoPro. So I also want to do that same sort of editing and manipulation to this one. I can zoom in a little bit, zoom over a little bit. I'll even change the rotation a tiny bit so that it's more centered. And then see how that looks. And maybe I'll scooch us over just a tiny bit more. And just whatever I think looks good, I'll stick with that. It's not really big deal. I just like to have this tertiary angle for viewers to see a little bit more of the overall room rather than just the angles on me and Danny and the guests. So let's go ahead and click that back to viewable, and I'll lock this one back. And the main bulk of our editing today is going to be doing this layering process of video clips, and how we're going to cut it, and I'll show you more later, is whichever one we have highlighted, if I hit Control C or if I hit Control K, it's going to cut that clip. And then we're going to have two separate clips. And then if I go and I cut right here, we can have this middle portion that we can just hit delete and take right out. So what that's going to do is make it so as our video plays, this camera angle is viewable, and then right as it gets to that opening, the GoPro is viewable, and right as it gets back to the top video track, we're going to go back to the camera angle on us. So the whole editing process is going to be us manually switching from one camera to another. And you'll see as it goes from one to another, I kind of notice that the rotation is a little off kilter. So I can go back into this effect controls tab, change the rotation just a tiny bit more, back this way, and try to get it level. Let's try to make it 1 degree. You can also click and type a degree amount, and that changes it like that. So that looks a little bit better. But I'm going to go ahead and reattach these. And we're going to go on to that third video track. So now let's lock these tracks and keep this last one open. We'll go to our last camera folder for the angle that's on our podcast guest. And I'll go to this start and try to find that clap, which I believe is right here. There it is. Mark in, click and drag over to the other claps. See if it lines up well. Yep, no echo. So now we're good to lock this one. Delete this last little bit of camera audio. So all we're left with is the microphone audio and the video clips. What we can do, you could take this fourth video file, and since this is just black from the camera audio, you could delete that, but it's not going to show in the edit anyways since it's all the way at the bottom, so I'll just leave it there. It's not a huge deal. But this one does need adjusted still, so we'll open up this camera again, highlight that, go back to effect controls, and let's adjust it so that it's looking perfectly centered and exactly how we want it to be presented to the viewer. And sometimes I have to adjust the iPhone clip brightness because it doesn't quite match the DSLR, but if we look, let's go ahead and flop between visuals. This one is a little bit darker, but I mean, I might change my mind later in the edit, but for right now, I think that'll be fine as far as our 3 camera angles go. So let's change them all to visible, lock all of them except the very top one, and let's get into the bulk of the edit and the technique of camera cuts. So now this is our setup for first draft. And what you'll notice is, unless you have a much better recording device than me, most of my cameras only record for a certain amount of time, and then they reset and the file is cut. So I'm gonna have some more work to do later in the episode as these camera angles end, and then we have to actually go back into the folders, and so it's just a process of lining up the clips and all of that, but I'll show you that as we get to it. For now, we've got these all lined up and ready to go. So all these 3 videos match the camera or the microphone audio, and we're gonna go through. And with our show, there's a point in the episode where we begin and we, say welcome back to the viewer, this and that. So I'm going to skip to that point and cut there. So now right here is where Danny says welcome back. And that's right where our episode starts. So I'm going to zoom in there. And I'm going to put another red marker so that I know in my next draft that this is going to be a point where we cut and put in the intro and all of that. And what I can do is I can go ahead and cut this guest angle down a little bit and get rid of this middle section. That way, while Danny is saying welcome back, the angle's on him. And so you can see now it's just up to you to monitor this minute by minute. So you're going to go through the whole episode and watch it. And then every time Danny and I are talking, I'm going to make sure that the angle's on us. Anytime the guest is talking, I'm going to make sure it's on him. And then every once in a while, I like to open up both the top video, the primary and the secondary camera angles, and I'll cut both of them. And then take a little segment, cut both of them on the end as well, delete this whole little middle section, and then that way the viewers not only get a view of me and Danny, they get a view of the guest, and then they get a view of the room. and it's just a little bit more better on the eye. It makes it a little less boring rather than one stagnant angle the whole episode, or just two angles being switched back and forth and back and forth. A tertiary angle is a little bit more interactive, shows a little bit more of the room, and kind of might, at least in my mind, it helps the viewer feel like they're there a little bit more and get a feel for what the whole room looks like. And now I don't have to go through the whole episode and show you all exactly where I cut and what I adjust with the camera angles and the clippings. I think you can kind of get the idea. So I'm going to go through this whole episode, and I'll get back to you when I get to these parts when the video clips end and we got to realign everything. So this definitely is a me problem, like I said, just because of the recording devices me and Danny use, the GoPro, the iPhone, and the Canon T3i. All of these cameras do not record for the entire episode without stopping, and those would be really, really big video clips, really big files to have to move around and manage. So if you have a better way to do this and you don't have to do any of these cuts at all, by all means use that, because it's going to save you a lot of time and energy. But what I will say is with the GoPro, it records for the whole time, but it separates the videos so that all I have to do is I have to go back into this GoPro folder, and where this says 11899, I have to go to where it says 21189, and that should be the very next clip. So I'll just back that up, and just like before, back it right next to it, right click, ripple delete to get it to line up perfectly. I'm gonna lock all these back, delete that, and then just to test to make sure it's the very next one, I'm gonna hide both of these videos, so all we got is the GoPro, and I'm gonna go from this clip into this clip and see how it looks. So it is the next in line, so it goes seamlessly. Only difference is all the edits I made to this GoPro clip is now needing to be done on this. So what I do, sometimes I take a piece of paper, I go to my edit, my effect control window, and I see what numbers I put each positioning at on the x-axis, y-axis, and the scale, and I just duplicate that. So we got 1408 horizontally, so let's check that out. Let's change this to 1408, bam. And then what is the vertical? 760, so we'll click that up, change it to, oh, it's at 760, so that wasn't adjusted. And then the scale is the last one, which was at 158, and then we'll go to this, change this to 158, and then change that rotation to 1 degree like we had it in the other one. So now it should flow seamlessly. There we go. So now when we zoom out, we can see we're back in good shape with this GoPro angle. We can lock that back and get back to our cuts. Now the tricky part about the other cameras, because these ones do actually stop recording, and I have to get up and start recording them again, which is not the best process, but that's just how me and Danny have done it, and I'll just get out of my chair and hit record on the devices again to keep it going. But what I will say is it's a little difficult because you no longer have that clapping audio peak to line everything up. So what I'll do is I'll take a word, like a sharp syllable or long O sound or something like that I can place a marker at, and then I can just line that up with the same heavy syllable or vowel sound or whatever in the microphone recording, and I'll just line it up that way. So it is a little bit tedious, a little intricate. There's a lot better ways to do this. This is just the capabilities me and Danny and I have right now. So if you have similar capabilities, this is how I do it. And before I go through the rest of the episode and make my cuts and edits, the last thing I'll tell you is, as I'm going through, one thing I'll do is if there's something that the guest says, if we have a little segment that I want to clip in order to make a highlight clip or anything like that, I want to export it separately. The way I'll organize that in this draft is I'll put a little marker, and if it's just something in general I want to look back on and maybe I'm undecided what I want to use it for, I can just leave that default green. And then if there's something that I know, like, oh, these couple of sentences, I want to make that a post for an Instagram reel or something like that for an Instagram story, I can actually color code it. If you double click the marker, you can color code it, and let's say orange is going to be this little clip, and it goes to this point. So I'll put another marker and then make that orange as well. And what this does, and I can show you more in part 2 when I go over all the post-production of the podcast edit, but if I zoom out, I'll be able to see all the little tick marks of places I need highlight clips. And to give you a little preview, what that's going to do is if I go back into where I created this sequence, and I'll go to the draft 1. If I click this sequence and I drag it over into make a new sequence out of it, and this can be more of a final draft, I'll call it draft 2. Oops. Then you'll notice, although it makes it one seamless sequence rather than all those little intricate cuts and intricacies, it'll make it one solid clip, but it'll have all those same tick marks. So now when I go through, I can go to this red and I can cut it and delete it, or I can go to this red and I can adjust whatever I need to adjust, and then with these I can go through. But you can use these tick marks for a lot of different purposes. The main thing I use them for is separating what I want to use and export as highlight clips and maybe sound bites and things like that, just to keep me going and chugging along without having to stop too much. And I can show you much more of the ins and outs of this in part 2 of this video.